Next up, cultural vibrancy rests on cultural authority. May I please welcome to the stage Mr. Wayne Barker, who will introduce the other panellists. Thank you, Wayne.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody.
Go run around.
Wait for everybody to settle down. Just so that we're clear, I'll be showing 2 video clips this morning, and just be aware that some of those images and those old people have passed away, but we have permission to show that publicly. My name is Wayne Jawandi Barker. I come from the Kimberley region of WA. My people are the Jugan, Yaro and Jabba Jabba people on the coastal areas of the Dampier Peninsula. I would like to acknowledge the Gunner people and the senior men and women in the room who carry their laws and cultural practices, for they are the living libraries we draw so much guidance, teachings and inspirations from. I work for the Kimberley Aboriginal Law and Culture Centre in the Kimberley. KLAC will present a view that the foundation and bedrock of First Nations culture and art practices must be seen as Australia's first high culture, our opera as well as our law. We will continue to promote traditional elders' voice, calling for self-determination and for policies to support the protective forces of language, culture and arts for our next generations of cultural custodians. Through discussions at Purumpa, we wish to draw out a pathway towards building a cultural authority which will provide the bedrock for a national voice for Australia's First Nations arts and cultural practitioners. Elders have long advocated for self-determination to exercise the full expressions of our cultural practices. A united voice, a cultural authority, would ensure provisions to protect the cultural vibrancy of Indigenous peoples' cultural practice and art forms, such as in songs, dance, story, music, symbols, ceremony, and creative narratives, whilst providing the mechanisms for the safety of all art and cultural workers. Celebrating First Nations artistic vibrancy in the modern world, whilst important, is not enough. In this presentation, notions of cultural leadership and cultural governance are explored as alternatives to Western governance. The foundation remains in the legacy of knowledge systems held by our elders. Elders are our cultural custodians, living libraries who have the obligation to maintain connection to the national and global well-being of all species played out in our cultural expression and practice. KLAC is a foundation partner in the Trade Routes Cultural Governance Project, which aims to share vibrant and complex traditional trade routes that spread across our current-day states and territories. This is an urgent and critical project that provides now elderly knowledge holders, along with emerging custodians, dynamic platforms to hold up these interconnected systems, fill knowledge gaps and revive cultural governance systems to underpin the well-being for future generations. The Kimberley Aboriginal Law and Culture Centre is the Kimberley region's peak Indigenous Law and Culture Centre. KLAC was established in 1985 by Kimberley Aboriginal leaders, and our mission is the cultural protection and maintenance of the 33 language groups. I wish to play a clip. We're all connected. And why? Because we've been here for over 60,000 years. This is not written down, so it's got to be contained in our songlines, it's got to be contained in our ceremonies, in our rituals.
For well-being culture, it makes us strong. We performing and dancing our culture. It makes our body, mind and soul clear, and it strengthens us. And, going out bush, singing, spiritually we just free, and we know that about our well-being, it just strengthens our bodies, boosts us,
My nana was born at Beagle Bay Mission, and she was training to be one of the first Aboriginal nuns. At that time, the assimilation policies meant that they couldn't learn their language, they couldn't practice their culture. And in my family, access to these type of practices has been largely lost because of the atrocious policies inflicted upon us that were stolen from us, so we need to get it back.
The bond between the individual and the land of the ancestors.
That bond is played out in culture.
You can't separate art from culture, and you can't separate culture from art. They go hand in hand.
But passing it on is the most important thing, so they can continue to carry it on, you know. They're the future.
Culture is not static, you're not quiet, you're not buried, you know. Culture is alive.
It's a time to unite. Unite through cultural obligation, through trade routes.
Knowing which way our dreaming came and which part is ours, that's why we're all connected. It's like a tree.
We get small glimpses of the antiquity of those long-distance exchanges from the desert to the Kimberley.
Facts would show that Aboriginal people did trade, using that term in a very broad sense, but met together over very long distances to exchange all manner of things.
It's important to have that connection and to rebuild the connection of the tribes.
I was given the right by my grandfather, and I will do as my grandfather did by trading the pearl shell.
Pearl shell in our culture is associated with rain, so it's a sacred object to my people. So.
We're doing the South Australian flint stone making for spear point and for trade.
We're trading knowledge for dancers. We're trading dancers for knowledge. We're doing that, and it's all about trading ceremony.
Our culture is still going to live on.
Aboriginal people, we always had our law and our culture, and it gives us our identity, where we really belong.
We have to keep our culture strong and keep it alive, and keep practicing it.
We there to support them. We there to keep going to see things happen, to do the right thing.
Culture gives us the strength to carry on.
People who come to the festival as cultural practitioners can say, yes, culture is still strong in the Kimberley, and in the next 3 years I will be dancing, I will be singing, I will be painting up my children and my grandchildren. This is the message we as Kalak needs to give. We are strong, culture is now. Through Aboriginal community control organisations such as KALAC, Aboriginal people seek stronger self-determination for their law, their culture and cultural practices. KALAC facilitates engagements of elders across diverse cultural blocks within the Kimberley for Aboriginal-led protection of ancestral laws and increased respect and understanding that the old people are our government. With the 2022 Purumpa Gathering, we wish to contribute to the realisation of a dream, a vision, held by First Nations arts and cultural leaders over the last 50 years, that of a cultural authority. Recent political changes presents real opportunities to recreate pathways for a future imagined by elders, where they enjoy a platform and voice to safeguard the world's oldest continuing living culture, supported by a national Indigenous arts and cultural agency or authority. United Nations declarations. Oops. How does this thing work? Hang on. It only has 2 buttons. Normally I have 4. United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. I just wanted to point to this because it reflects, I guess, the attitude, the global attitude towards the First Nations people around the world, and that Australia, in effect, is wanting. It's way beyond, way behind others. And with this in mind, I'd note that the Australia at present fails to meet its obligations under the Articles 5, 8, 9, 11 and 12 of this declaration. Now, Article 5, if I may, is Indigenous people have the right to maintain and strengthen their distinct political, legal, economic, social and cultural institutions while retaining their right to participate fully, and if so they choose, in political, economic and social and cultural life of the state. Now, we've been having some conversations both within Purumpa but also outside in the corridors with various state ministers who have been here in terms of the art and cultural space. And we can see that there's this gravitas, there's this movement towards having a real robust discussions with First Nations peoples about exactly that, the socio-economic status of First Nations people right across this nation. But more importantly, how does that deliver well-being? I place the question to all of you in this room, what is culture? How does it define you? And how does culture deliver well-being? If that is the premise for our future, then that's what we have to robustly take on board. And we have to challenge that. And I'm going off script here because I can't move the numbers, but if I may, if you give me the license to do so, we at KLAC firmly believe that we're at a pivotal moment now. We are at a point of, if you like, the loss of our living libraries who hold the traditional law and custom that bind us to our past, establish our present and secure our future is essentially being eroded because of time. The colonial experiment that Craig Ritchie talks about briefly and others have talked about has had a direct impact on the way in which we exercise our identity, the way we exercise our creative freedom, but more importantly, the way we uphold the legacy of our past that ties us to this land, our DNA connection to this land. We talk about 60 to 75,000 years of occupancy on this piece of real estate. This DNA connection that each and every one of First Nations people who binds themselves to this land. This is the key. This is your responsibility. It is not something to be taken lightly. And when you look around you and you see your old senior men and women passing away and you're losing that first-hand connection to reconnect to who you are, your DNA structure, who you really are. This is what we in KLAC defend with vigour and seriousness, because without it, we are awash. Without it, we are truly assimilated. And I want to ask you the question, how many of you are assimilated? If that's the threat, what's your response? Your response is traditional law and custom, the things that tie you to your people. You stand, and we stand together as brothers and sisters, but we stand unified. The question before us today, from Francesca's presentations of bringing it forward, is what will you do to bring it forward? How will you participate and speak along the lines of Nadia's words to her son? How do we do this? How do we make our future, the future for our generations to follow us, our sons and our daughters, our grandsons, to paint, to sing, to dance, to ritualize our lives, even though the world is changing around us in such a rapid manner? I sit on the First Nations Strategy panel for one purpose only, and that is to continue to voice the cultural authority element that comes from our people. Old people are the government. We lean to them, we recognize their authority, and that makes us strong. Without them, we are weak. Without them, we fail. We fail being the right custodians for the future. This is the honest. What is culture? How does it define you, and how does it deliver well-being for you? What I showed it before, the video clip, is a snip of what happens in the Kimberley region. We all defend our local territory. We all live in this space. I come from two different groups, two different tribal groups, strong in culture, strong in activity, strong in performance. Nevertheless, as I get older and as I get wiser, hopefully, I really appreciate the legacy that they've left for me. But make no mistake, I understand the responsibility that I have to make sure that I take that responsibility in its purest form, if you like, that rescues me into the ever-changing world that I live in, so that I can secure the future for my children, my grandchildren, and those members of my community. Community is powerful, community is strong, but we're fragile, we're threatened. And while the narrative around economics and the power of First Nations art and culture is being exploited by others, we've heard the talk yesterday and we'll continue to hear it this week, by others, while profiteers, including government, who brand our culture as part of the sort of identity of Australia, whatever that is. Our First Nations people, as unique as our nations within our nations, scattered across this amazing continent, stand firm that we defend who we are. We defend our cultural integrity. We defend our language, our ceremonies, our ritual, our art, and we will not allow others to exploit us any further. As I said, I've drifted off script, but I just wanted to pause for a moment to say we are, as Francesca says, we're at a pivotal moment now. We can make a choice here. We can continue as we continue and allow the world to dominate and dictate what we do and how we express ourselves, as we struggle to reinvent culture, as we struggle to reconnect with ourselves and our neighbours. Or we can say, no, here's the line in the sand. We're going to start here and rebuild those people 50 years ago that was in this report. Our words haven't changed, our meaning hasn't changed, our intention hasn't changed. We're the new soldiers now, we're the new cultural bosses now, we're the new custodians now. It's up to us to do that. You've got a pivotal moment this week. In 4 days you're going to make a decision in your own heart whether or not this idea of a national authority is worth the effort. Or shall we all go back to our own territory and fight our own battles locally? That hasn't happened in the last 50 years. How do you think it's going to happen in the next 50 years? What is the future for us? What is the future for us? What is culture? How does it define you? And what will culture be like in 50 years under your watch? I'd like to invite my chairman and Aggie to come up and join me and speak about their particular... My chairman, Gordon Marshall, he has some views about what that is. Aggie, who's running our women's program, we've got a national Kimberley-wide Aboriginal Women's Strategy Plan, and we're working through the Trade Route project, as you saw, interconnecting our groups, because we understand, yes, Kimberley is strong, but we're stronger together. We're stronger interconnected. And this is why the Trade Route program is so important, but more importantly, women's roles in that as well. So what you saw is a little bit of snapshot of the Trade Route project. So I'd like to introduce you to Gordon Marshall, the chairman of Kimberley Aboriginal Law and Culture Centre, and Aggie Pigram, who's running our women's program. Yes, so at this stage, can you hear me? Yeah, I think so. at this stage, what we'd like to do is we'd like to engage with you about some of the things that I've raised in a robust way. We can have speeches, we can have presentations, but this is about hearts and minds. You know, this is about us in the community. This is about defending what we hold most dear. So for the next 20 minutes, I guess that's how much time we've got up here. Certainly like to invite you to speak to both the chairman and Aggie.
Yeah, thanks, Wayne. What I like probably to say is that we got a very, Kellic has got a very unique structure in how you sit on the board and how do you become members to live in you have to be a Kimberley, living in the Kimberley, but on the board, to be on the board of Kellic, you have to, at the men's part of it, you have to be a fully initiated man to sit on the board on the men's side, and you have to be still practice your law. If you don't, you can be initiated but not practicing your law, then the old people won't let you sit on the board because it's a cultural organization and it runs culturally. No one speaks out of place when the old people are speaking, not like you see them in the parliament where somebody's sniggling around behind. They should come and see how we operate with our bosses, but once they get up or they start speaking, nobody says a word unless they're asked to say something. So these are the structures that we're fully cultural people that we, on this board run through Kellic. So that's one of the things, just to get everybody to understand how strong and culture that in the Kimberley is and Kellic is as well.
Yeah, good morning everyone. I just wanted to introduce myself firstly. So my name's Aggie Pigram. I'm a proud Yawuru Badi woman. So Yawuru from Broome, and I say Yawuru first because I'm Yawuru from both my mother and father. Born and bred and raised in Broome, and Badi from my mother, so from Judadin community, but Bunial Buru, which is a clan group of the Badi tribe. And I currently live in Adilun community, which is on the Dampier Peninsula in the Kimberley, Western Australia. So yeah, my role here today actually is I am a young Indigenous woman, one of the youngest as the Kellic director. And I see my role again is, and I've been tasked more recently, so that's my first role with Kellic, as a young woman on this board, which has majority of the history has historically been, yes, our cultural bosses, all our senior bosses, men and women, and I've been very privileged in the last year or two to be appointed by my own people to represent, as a young person, the voices of the Western cultural bloc of the Kimberley. So yeah, and then Wayne just touched on, I also have taken on the task more recently to coordinate, host and co-facilitate this women's cultural gathering and been a part of the consultation process over the last few years, again, which is running parallel, I guess, to this bigger national plan, our Kimberley Aboriginal Women's Strategic Plan, and I'm happy to share that with anyone and with you, Annie Francesca, Badi woman. So to see how we can align on a national level and again on a state level, because these are real informed consultations and voices from our women, our senior women who have recently, well, it's been over 30 years, this long call, and it's only until now that we have this plan that elevates the women's voices and our role to sit alongside our men in the space of language, law and culture. So yes, thank you.
Yeah, another thing that Wayne's talked a lot about is our trade route program, and we've been working on that for a few years, working from the west, where it where we are at the west and going right through Central Australia into South Australia. We've actually, in the last 2 years, I think, Wayne, that we've been coming in between the three states and talking to the elders there to work on this trade route program, which we've been working on. And we've seen Mugi as well, been down, had a look at his country last year, and then into the Central Australia to Yundamu, Lajamanu. We've conversed with all those traditional people, which we work with them, as well as in Belgo, which will be in Belgo next week, and we'll have all the senior elders from all over the cultural people, like from Yundamu, Lajamanu, the Aranda mob, and also from Mugi's coming up, I think, and we've got a few of them, and some of the ones from maybe Nyangamara coming as well. So we've got 3 lots of, all different languages, because when CALAC started, CALAC is an organisation where it was started by elders. It's something that came out of the KLC, and but it actually looks after the valley. So you look after Wangajunga, Warmayari, and Gugaja people, and goes west towards Niganamangala and Garjari. That's the people that they look after, that comes under their umbrella, and mainly the people that are still practicing law. So we travel in that same line with all these old people to keep the culture strong, and so that kids. We've also, coming out of CALAC, is a organisation called Yiraman. Yiraman is a program where they've been taking out kids, and Wayne can probably articulate and talk a little bit more about that, with us taking out kids. Our last camp was about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Took out 26 kids. We teach them with the old people, singing songs, learning how to make artifacts, and talking to them, and making sure that when they're out there on camp, they talk to them in language, and they get an answer in language. So, and a lot of the kids there from around the Fitzroy Valley, because that's where they mainly, because CALAC is in Fitzroy, so we take a lot of kids from there and from Bijadanga, all the Garjari, and there's some Mangala kids there, Jorlin, Nyangamara. We bring them all in and work with those kids, and they talk to them out there. And our bosses are quite strong at the moment. They're frail in body, but they're really strong in their minds, and they're teaching, and they're singing, and they're songs. So, and we're actually lucky now that we've been doing a fair bit of recording about getting to these old people, video and audio as well, so that we can have the stories, the songline. I travel with my older brother all the time, and he's now allowing me to record a lot of this stuff and put on a USB, and we stick it in the car, and we practice as we go along singing. So, everywhere we go. So before he never used it, I said, well, I can record you. He said, no, if you want to learn, you learn while you're sitting next to me, or you sit in a group with old people and you sing. And I mean, growing up, that's how we learned to speak language. We never had any recording. We had to sit down with the old people. And when they're talking, you listen, and you learn by listening. And that's how things, forever it's been passed down from head to head. Just the knowledge come down. It was never put in papers. Old people couldn't write, so you have to be there to do that. And I was lucky to be able to, my brother brought me back, because my mother was a stolen generation. She was taken away from Lagrange Mission, which is Bijadanga now. Everyone would know that as Bijadanga, in 1934. And she never came back until after she was married. We lost out on a lot of that growing up in the 50s, and then coming back now. My brother brought me back in. Luckily, I worked with him in the early 60s, and been able to retain that memory of how Mum spoke to us when we were small. And now I can understand a few other languages as well, which is helps when you're going out into these places like to Yundamula, Yamano, Balgo is where we usually meet up and go when we have our ceremony time. So, yeah, but a Yearman project is one of the great things that happen with kids that we take out on country. And maybe Wayne can elaborate a little bit more on that.
Yeah, thanks.
I have to.
My question is for anyone who would like to answer, but with so many different cultural groups and nations in the Kimberley alone, how do you work through the strategy and the ability to be able to get everybody's culture involved in the one cultural strategy?
There's a lot of the languages is the difference is but the culture is the same, because we all practice the Southern law culture. That's what we are practicing, and it's around from. There are different types of things that I can't mention. The different types of law that's been practiced, but there are the languages. All different languages in the Kimberley. You know, in Fitzroy Crossing, you got Bunabay and Gunyandi, and around Fitzroy, the ones that were brought in the 1976 in the referendum, when there was no more people out in the station, they had to pay basic wages, so they got rid of all the. I can remember when Mum and Dad were on station, they were had to go and live in town. Because there was 11 of us in a family, so the station would pay the men, but the tucker and everything else was free, and all things in the station. But they couldn't hold on to all the family because they had to pay better wage, and they didn't want to do that. So they let go a lot of people, and they all came into town where they congregated, same as in Fitzroy. Now you got a lot of the Nyangamada people and all the Walmayuri. Mainly Walmayuri come back out of the desert, and they're now living in small communities and in Fitzroy, like in Fitzroy, you got Mendarati is one of the communities, and they've been put into a township where they're overcrowded now, and that became out of that referendum where the basic wage.